Welcome to the arena. Today, I am going to present to you a competitive Pokemon battle that is simply bonkers. It must be seen to be believed. A battle containing wacky TM choices, tubular game mechanics, and trash talk between both the people playing and the spectators. To top it all off, it has the most bonkers, exciting, and ludicrous ending to a battle that I have ever seen. The battle is a Gen 2 overused battle between a French player known as Zokuru and a Greek player known as GLFG number 7. The battle was played as part of the Gen 2 Overused Invitational, a tournament where high-level players are invited to compete. Our battle took place on May 18th, 2025, so just over 2 months ago. Both Zokuru and GLF are well-respected Gen 2 players, having competed in many tournaments over the years. Zokuru has gained a reputation as one of the metagame's best stall players, as well as an eccentric and creative team builder. His opponent GLF is no slouch either though. He is fully capable of wielding both offensive and defensive teams. A battle between these two maestros of modern GSC is bound to be interesting. The specific battle we will cover though, it goes beyond interesting. Some who witness this game may classify it as absolute cinema. Ladies and gentlemen, strap yourselves in. The show is about to commence. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Zokuru versus GLFG number 7. Our battle began with such an air of normalcy. In fact, it began in the most GSCOU way possible. Snorlax versus Snorlax, a lane matchup that's been seen countless times. Depending on the sets of the two Snorlax, a lot could be done on this turn. In the eyes of both players, the play was to swap out to their Skarmory. Okay, it's looking like a battle between two defensive teams. Skarmory can't do much to itself, so both Zokuru and GLF decide to switch out. Zokuru sends out an Umbreon, while GLF reveals a Forretress. Both players, again, decide to switch out. GLF switches out probably out of fear of mean look Umbreon, while Zokuru swaps out because he can't do anything to Forretress. Zokuru switches out to a Tentacruel, while GLF reveals a Raikou. Our cast members are quickly being revealed, and you want to get used to seeing them. Yet again, both players swap out. GLF goes back out to his Forretress, while Zokuru sends out a Blissey. So far, all both players have done is switch out, and both are pretty clearly using defensive teams. Zokuru switches out to his Tentacruel, while, at last, the first move of the game is used, a Protect from GLF's Forretress. The first attacking move is used when Zokuru uses Surf with Tentacruel, dealing 16% to GLF's Snorlax. After that, it's back to switching out. Both players switch out for 7 straight turns. GLF reveals an Umbreon in the process. On turn 14, however, a very important piece of information is revealed. Zokuru's Umbreon uses Growth. When Umbreon uses Growth, it only uses it to baton pass it out. Spoiler alert, Zokuru's Umbreon doesn't even have an attacking move. The next turn, Zokuru sets up a second Growth as GLF reveals Thunderbolt on Raikou. Turn 16 reveals more important information. Umbreon baton passes its Growth boost to Tyranitar as Raikou foils Zokuru's Growth shenanigans with Roar. Zokuru has repeated his game 1 strategy. Use a very passive, mega stall team without spikes. Dropping spikes is something very rarely done in GSCOU. Spikes are just a very powerful tool in this metagame because of the passive damage they provide. Zokuru's team is incredibly passive and it lacks a clear win condition. He has Skarmory for its positive matchup against Snorlax and other physical attackers. He has Tentacruel for its superb rapid spinning talents. He has Blissey for its incredible special bulk and access to Heal Bell. And Tyranitar is there for its access to Pursue, Roar, and its fire resistance. Zokuru's Umbreon is one of the most important Pokemon in this battle. Umbreon is running a Growth plus Baton Pass set. Umbreon can't do anything to stop Raikou from roaring it out, but Raikou can't do that forever. Roar has 32 PP, while Growth and Baton Pass have 61. Umbreon and its ability to pass special attack boost is one of, if not Zokuru's best means of making progress. The recipient options are Tyranitar, Blissey, and Tentacruel. That's not all Umbreon is good for. With Growth, Baton Pass, and Growl, Umbreon has 3 moves that have 61 PP. Add Rest onto that, and Umbreon has 199 total PP. It is a champion of PP stalling. It also helps that Umbreon isn't immediately threatened by any of the Pokemon on GLF's team, though it does have to beware of Toxic. GLF begins to recognize the reality of what is going on. He knew this was going to be defense versus defense from turn 2, but not to this incredible extent. On turn 18, an unfazed Zokuru goes back out to his Umbreon and uses Growth. At this point, GLF has recognized what this battle is likely to become. An absolute slog that is going to last for several hundred turns. GLF gives Zokuru an offer. Well, if your Snorlax isn't using a mixed attacking set, we can tie this from turn 18. The next turn, Zokuru hits back at GLF, saying, I am not tying versus someone who brought Umbreon and Roar Raikou. I must punish your insolence. Zokuru also takes advantage of GLF's statement, deducing from it that GLF doesn't have a Belly Drum Snorlax, which could break through Zokuru's team. Whoops. 2 stall teams, one without spikes, duking it out. On turn 24, GLF responds to Zokuru's comments saying, well, I thought you might want to preserve some time. I suppose time isn't money for everyone. On the next turn, Zokuru says, you can forfeit if you are afraid. GLF simply replies, with a lol. Zokuru does not seem to like GLF. I don't know if it's anything personal, or he just thinks he sucks at the game, but it's clear from the shown comments that Zokuru is not a very big fan of his opponents. This is not the last time these two will talk in the battle chat. From there, both players engage in a stalemate, with very little of no happening. Zokuru's Tentacle keeps shutting down Forretress's attempts to set up spikes, and Zokuru keeps trying to pass Growth to teammates with Umbreon. On turn 32, he successfully passes Growth to Tyranitar. Tyranitar, as we will come to see, is probably the protagonist of this battle. Tyranitar is arguably the most valuable recipient of Umbreon's Growth. Tyranitar has Pursue, which can be used to force damage onto the opponent. The more special attack boost Tyranitar has, the stronger its Pursue. Tyranitar also has Crunch to immediately threaten a Pokemon that stays in. With Roar, Tyranitar can both force out GLF's curse using Snorlax, and drag in a Pokemon so they suffer Pursue. The Pokemon it would be most effective at removing with Pursue would be Forretress and Raikou. Tyranitar is not going to immediately break GLF's team. Umbreon and Skarmory can both take it on, especially when you factor in GLF's specific Skarmory set. It is nonetheless a powerful tool though. Zokuru's Tyranitar remains on the field, switching between Roar and Pursue for quite a few turns. By turn 41, Zokuru manages to reduce Forretress's HP to 59%. Just then, the final Pokemon is revealed, as GLF sends out his Starmie. All 12 Pokemon have been revealed, and we now have GLF's full team. GLF's team is far more standard than Sakuru's is. His set of 6 Pokemon is a team that's shown up in many a tournament game over the years. This set of 6 Pokemon is actually a sample team, one of the resource teams provided to new players. He has Raikou to answer special attackers, Forretress for spikes, Starmie for rapid spin, as well as its positive matchup against the likes of Machamp, and finally, he has Umbreon for pursuit support, as well as its general all-around bulk. He does have some less standard sets though. GLF's Raikou is a Roar variant. Roar Raikou is a formerly dominant and common OU threat that has sharply declined in popularity because of how much less effective Raikou is defensively without Sleep Talk. Back to the battle, it's turn 42. Turn 42 is an interesting turn. Starmie outspeeds and 2-hit KOs Tyranitar with Surf, but Sakura has super effective Crunch. Looking at the damage calculator though, a +1 Tyranitar Crunch only has a 15.4% chance to 1-hit KO Starmie. Staying in and trying to fish for that 15% chance is very risky though, because if Starmie lands a critical hit Surf, Tyranitar will be 1-hit KO'd, and Zakuru loses a very important tool. Zokuru, however, decides to take the risk and go for it. Starmie uses Surf and doesn't get a critical hit, while Tyranitar's Crunch misses out, dealing 93%. Zokuru is forced to switch out, sending out his Umbreon, giving Starmie the opportunity to use Recover. That gives Umbreon the opportunity to pass another growth to Tyranitar. Again, on turn 45, Zokuru's Tyranitar is dead to a critical hit, but Zokuru again takes a huge risk and decides to use Rest. Zokuru is playing with fire. Losing Tyranitar to a crit would have terrible consequences. On turn 49, Skarmory reveals itself to be a Sand Attack variant. That is going to be key later on. GLF Skarmory in general is going to be key later, a thorn in Zokuru's side. GLF Skarmory plays a similar role to Zokuru's one. It has no means of dealing damage outside of Toxic. Zokuru has both Heal Bell and Rest to neuter Toxic, but it's still nice to waste the PP of those moves. GLF Skarmory counters Zokuru's Snorlax, but this time, it's also helpful for Tyranitar. Skarmory resists both Crunch and Pursue, and has Sand Attack to reduce Tyranitar's accuracy. In games like this, every bit of PP matters. It sucks to waste PP because a move misses, and Skarmory is frustratingly effective at forcing that to happen. Zokuru again drags in Forretress with Tyranitar's Roar, and by turn 52, thanks to boosted Crunch and Pursue, Zokuru brings Forretress down to just 28%. That sounds great, and it's certainly helpful, but Forretress isn't a huge worry in this game. Normally, in stall versus stall games like this, the spikes using Forretress would be very important. In this game, however, Forretress is kind of a punching bag. It's very hard for Forretress to do its job because of Tentacruel, who effortlessly switches into it and spins away its spikes. GLF just has to hope that Sakuru gets greedy, and doesn't send in Tentacruel immediately if he wants spikes to stay up. Tyranitar can also switch in and threaten Forretress with growth boosted Pursue. We have already seen Tyranitar get a low on HP, just from pursuit damage. To give Forretress some credit, it can waste PP using Protect. Also, as we will come to see, Zokuru, rather sillily, doesn't always send in Tentacruel versus Forretress. Forretress did set up spikes against Tyranitar, so until Zokuru gets his Tentacruel back in, he is dealing with spikes. GLF is able to make aggressive double switches and put pressure on Zokuru. GLF also reveals his Snorlax to be a Curse variant. Given what we know so far, it's likely Curse, Rest, Sleep Talk, though Curse, Rest, Earthquake or Curse, Rest, Flamethrower aren't out of the question. On turn 60, Zokuru returns to the battle chat, criticizing GLF for a play he just made. You just sent the phaser against the toxic user. Nice play. If Zokuru's Skarmory was to pull Toxic from Sleep Talk, Raikou would be forced to use Rest, giving Umbreon an opportunity. Right now, Raikou is the immediate gatekeeper to Zokuru's team. Raikou is able to shut down Umbreon's attempts to pass Growth with Roar. Long term though, Raikou can't stop Umbreon forever, as we've already gone over. Both Growth and Baton Pass have 61 PP, while Raikou's Roar only has 32. Raikou is going to run out of Roar PP before Umbreon runs out of Growth or Baton Pass PP. Doesn't help that Raikou has to use Rest without Sleep Talk for recovery. When it's asleep, it can't do anything. Raikou also just isn't a threat offensively. Both Snorlax and Blissey sit on it without spikes. It can't abuse Roar with spikes up because spikes are so hard to keep up. Thanks, Tentacruel. Back to the battle, Raikou roars in Zokuru's Snorlax. Zokuru can now fire off an attack or set up with Snorlax, revealing what set it is if he chooses to. Snorlax could be an anti-offense set with something like Curse, Earthquake, Rest, or it could be Belly Drum. If Zokuru's Snorlax is a Belly Drum set, it poses a massive threat to GLF's team. Ultimately, Zokuru reveals his Snorlax to be a double-edged variant, decreasing the odds of it being a Belly Drum set. After another few uneventful turns, we see the consequences of not sending Tentacruel out immediately to fight Forretress. GLF double switches his Snorlax in as Zokuru brings in Tentacruel, wasting a turn for Zokuru and forcing Tentacruel to take some Spikes chip. This doesn't last long though. A few turns later, Zokuru safely gets Tentacruel in on Forretress, letting it spin away Spikes. For the next dozen plus turns, Tentacruel and Forretress stalemate. Forretress sets up Spikes, Tentacruel rapid spins them away. Tentacruel is certainly the main thing gatekeeping GLF. If GLF was able to play with Spikes, he could definitely break through Zokuru eventually. That just isn't feasible because of Tentacruel. It is very difficult to keep Spikes up when Tentacruel is around. It easily switches into the Spikes using Forretress and gets rid of its Spikes. Forretress can't do anything to Tentacruel, while Tentacruel can, in return, use Surf. Rapid Spin has 61 PP, while Spikes has 32. It's a similar dynamic to Growth versus Roar. Tentacruel can also safely remove Spikes against Skarmory, Umbreon, and Starmie. GLF doesn't have a Gengar or Misdreavus to potentially block Rapid Spin. Zokuru does have to be careful with his Tentacruel. If he risks Tentacruel to a crit and it winds up dead, he is going to lose the game. He will inevitably lose to Spikes chip. Aside from Rapid Spin, Tentacruel can be a recipient of Growth from Umbreon later in the game. It also has Toxic, which can be used to force Pokemon to rest. Back to the battle. The stalemate is broken when GLF begrudgingly switches his Snorlax in. Not much happens for the next 12 or so turns. Zokuru does reveal Thunderbolt on his Blissey though, further cementing the idea that it's a Growth recipient. After a few more uneventful turns, turn 92 presents some more grim information for GLF. Turn 92 ends up being a real I dodged a bullet there kind of turn. You see, on turn 92, Blissey uses Present. If you aren't in the know, Present is a bugged move in GSC. It's actually a very bugged move. Present is a move that can deal huge amounts of damage to Pokemon whose secondary typing is a special one. Raikou and Umbreon are both special typed Pokemon, so they are terrified to be on the field with Blissey. If Blissey gets a high base power Present, it can one-hit KO Umbreon from full HP. GLF almost lost his Umbreon. Blissey is another important element in this game. Defensively, Blissey counters Raikou and Starmie. Zokuru is running a Heal Bell Blissey, which lets him rid his team of any inflicted status conditions. 4 of Zokuru's Pokemon have Rest, but it's nice to immediately wake them up. Blissey is more notable for what it can do offensively though. If a growth is passed to Blissey, it can threaten 5 of Zakuru's 6 Pokemon. Skarmory and Starmie are both weak to Thunderbolt. Forretress also can stomach Thunderbolt if Blissey has boosted special attack. Raikou and Umbreon don't really care about Thunderbolt, but they do care about Present. It does suck to rely on Present though. The move can miss, heal, or just get its weaker damage rolls. Blissey is not an immediate threat right now. Snorlax walls it and threatens to one-hit KO it with a critical hit double edge. But if Zakuru can run Snorlax low on PP, or better yet KO it, Blissey can end the game. It might not seem obvious right now, but GLF is definitely the player in a worse spot. From turn 1, it was always going to be incredibly difficult for him to win this game. There is just very little, almost nothing that GLF's team can do to break Zakuru's team. He can't keep spikes up, and he doesn't have any of the Pokemon that really threaten Zakuru's team. Umbreon, Skarmory and Forretress are naturally passive Pokemon, made worse by the sets GLF is using on them. He doesn't have Explosion Forretress or Curse plus Drill Peck on Skarmory. Zakuru has the tools to hard counter all 6 of GLF's Pokemon. Is there any hope for GLF? Well, kinda. If this was a game being played by 2 robots who never ever misplayed, GLF would not win the game. That is not the case though. GLF's hope is that Zakuru messes up. He has to hope Zakuru greedily keeps in one of his important pieces versus a Pokemon that would KO it with a critical hit. It would be like if Zakuru kept Tentacruel in against Snorlax or Raikou. If GLF was to land a crit and KO Tentacruel, he would probably win the game. Hoping that your opponent screws up is not something you want to rely on though, especially in a high level tournament. Now the options for Zakuru to win aren't plentiful either, but there's certainly more for him. He has Blissey, he has Umbreon, and he has Tyranitar. I think that if Zakuru was given an infinite amount of time to win this game, he would eventually win. He would eventually run GLF's team out of PP and emerge victorious. Thing is, Zakuru doesn't have an infinite amount of time. You see, Pokemon Showdown has this little thing built in known as the Endless Battle Clause. This is a clause that prevents battles from becoming endless. How it does this is by forcing the game to end on turn 999. If the game isn't won by then, the game is tied and neither player wins. If Zakuru can't win in time, then that's just too bad. He does not get a victory. So basically, Zakuru is in very little danger of losing this game, but he needs to make sure he actually wins. For GLF, he just has to sit there and fight off Zakuru for 999 turns. It's definitely possible for him to survive that long. I would even say he is favored to right now, but it's not gonna be easy. GLF has to make sure he keeps his focus and preserves the important PP on his Pokemon. He can still hope that Zakuru messes up as well. With all that in mind, I think you will now see this battle in a different light. Zakuru is trying to win before time runs out, and GLF is trying to stop him from achieving that. As you have guessed by now, this battle is extensive. We are going to be here for a while, so from now on, I am just going to cover the turns where something notable happens. Don't think I have forgotten about the battle chat too. Zakuru and GLF aren't done there just yet. It's now turn 100. Umbreon baton passes growth to Tyranitar. It hits Raikou with a crunch, and it's then forced out by Sand Attack Skarmory. GLF then uses more Sand Attack PP than is probably necessary, and we stalemate for another 10 turns. Zakuru reveals Heal Bell on his Blissey, but GLF probably already deduced that Blissey had it. Zakuru then returns to make fun of GLF in the battle chat. On turn 118, his Tyranitar suffers a critical hit Thunderbolts. Fearing another critical hit Thunderbolt, he switches out to Snorlax, who funnily enough also suffers a crit Thunderbolt that would have KO'd Tyranitar. Zakuru says, "Good thing I knew of your luck," in the battle chat. Very sneaky. The next 30 to 40 something turns are the same stalemate crap we have already seen. Zakuru does almost lose his Blissey though. On turn 153, he keeps Blissey in on Snorlax and takes a double edge. If that double edge had crit, Blissey would be dead. Things do pick back up a few turns later though. Zakuru manages to pass not one but two growth boosts to his Tentacruel. Tentacruel fires off a Surf that deals 35% to GLF Snorlax. With Snorlax at 45%, a critical hit Surf will take it out. GLF takes the gamble and risks it. Tentacruel uses Surf, and Snorlax survives. Zakuru is probably thinking, meh, who cares? He probably thinks this is a non-sleep talk cursed Snorlax, that's running Lovely Kiss or something. He can just fish for a critical hit as Snorlax snoozes. Tentacruel uses Surf, and GLF proves Zakuru wrong. GLF is using Sleep Talk Snorlax, and he hits Tentacruel with a double edge. If that double edge had crit, Zakuru would have lost an almost unlosable game. After that, it's back to the boring. We do see GLF Starmie show up though. GLF Starmie is one of the least relevant Pokemon in this game. Rapid Spin Starmie is useless because his opponent doesn't have spikes. The thing Starmie is most useful for is PP stalling. Thanks to Substitute and Recover, Starmie can force Pokemon to waste PP. It's able to take on a growth boosted Tentacruel. Starmie can two-shot Tyranitar with Surf, but it's threatened in return by Crunch, so this is risky for GLF to do. On turn 183, Zakuru manages to pass two growth boosts to Tyranitar against Forretress. Tyranitar crunches, Forretress uses Protect and Toxic. To be expected. On turn 185 though, an angry Tyranitar decides to land a critical hit Pursuit as Forretress switches out, bringing GLF's Forretress down to just 3%. Thanks to Sand Attack Skarmory, Tyranitar is forced out. But if Zakuru had landed his Roar on turn 189 and Forretress was the Pokemon brought out, he could have gotten Forretress right there, and that would have been helpful. On turn 195, GLF decides to keep in Raikou against Snorlax, who again KOs it with a critical hit double edge. Also he can use Roar. Because Zakuru didn't send in Tentacruel against Forretress, spikes are currently up. Zakuru, in the battle chat, jokingly thanks GLF for wasting some Roar PP. We then see how much harder this game is for Zakuru with spikes up. GLF starts putting some actual pressure on him with aggressive double switches to Snorlax and Raikou. We even see Roar Raikou racking up some spikes damage, as GLF punishes the Tentacruel switch by doubling to Snorlax. In fact, spikes stay up for a while, so Zakuru is unable to remove them. GLF starts playing very aggressively with his double switches, getting a lot of spikes chip in. He keeps shutting down Baton Pass Umbreon with Roar Raikou. Zakuru starts making risky plays to break this cycle. He actually keeps Skarmory in against Raikou at one point. Though this isn't as bad as it sounds because Thunderbolt actually has just a 7% chance to one-hit KO Skarmory. Though again, crits. Zakuru keeps feeling the pressure of spikes, until finally, on turn 255, he takes another huge risk and uses Rapid Spin against Raikou. A critical hit Thunderbolt would have ended Tentacruel's life. Spikes have been removed though, so Zakuru can breathe again. Those 50 or so turns did slow things down for him. He was certainly on the back foot. GLF wasted HP and PP on his Pokemon without needing to use PP himself, just via double switches with spikes up. Apparently though, Zakuru didn't get the goddamn memo. He again lets Forretress get spikes up 4 turns later. I mean, it's nice to pursue chip Forretress, but you have Tentacruel right there. Forretress can be made a non-issue. After a few more turns of dealing with spikes and failing to get rapid spin opportunities, Zakuro asks GLF if he is still confident in tying this game on turn 270. GLF does not reply. Again, Zakuro has to risk Tentacruel to get spikes off, keeping it in against a Snorlax that thankfully is switched out for a double switch. Despite some misplays from Zakuro, he is still in the driver's seat in this game. Things are going decently for him. He still has 37 growth PP on Umbreon, and Raikou is down to 60 in Roars. GLF's Raikou, Snorlax and Skarmory are starting to run low on PP for their important moves. Also, GLF's poor Forretress keeps being bullied. It keeps getting around 3 turns of leftovers recovery, only for that recovery to be taken away by a Tyranitar Pursue. Forretress is forever stuck at sub 40% HP. It's now turn 300. On turn 314, Zakuro again makes the mistake of letting Forretress use spikes. He is again put on the back foot and yet again decides to risk losing the entire game. He keeps Tentacruel in against the Snorlax, who would have one-hit KO'd Tentacruel if it landed a critical hit. Zakuro has put his Tentacruel's life on the line 3 times now. You could say a critical hit has low odds of happening, but it's an unnecessary risk that Zakuro keeps taking. Zakuro is incredibly favoured in this game, yet he nearly keeps throwing it all away. Nevertheless, he isn't punished and Tentacruel lives to see another day. Only for Zakuro to, yet again, let Forretress get up spikes not that long after. This time, Tentacruel is at a mere 43%. Zakuro now has to try double switch Tentacruel in on one of GLF's passive Pokémon. Zakuro is again forced to waste more turns on the back foot. In the midst of all this, he again thanks GLF for wasting Roar PP on turn 345. At this point, one of the spectators has had enough of Zakuro's quips. Conflict, who is often regarded as one of, if not the greatest GSC OU player in history, steps in and tells Zakuro that he shouldn't talk. He presumably blames that Zakuro shouldn't talk when he is also misplaying, or that he just thinks Zakuro should shut up and focus on the game. On the same turn this happens, both players' Snorlax is on the field, and Zakuro's one lands a critical hit double edge on GLF's one, bringing it down to 32%. Won't be the last time Zakuro's Snorlax piles damage on GLF's one. Zakuro is again on the back foot. For a little bit, he doesn't try to double switch Tentacruel in, he just decides to play with spikes. We also keep seeing the never-ending cycle GLF's Forretress is in. It reduces low HP, but then it recovers to around 40% off of leftovers, only for it to go back to 20% a few turns later. Forretress now only has a single use of Protect left. Once that's gone, it's gonna be even harder for Forretress to recover. Let's forget about all that though. One of the most pivotal sequences of the game is about to begin. Turn 363 to turn 365. On turn 363, GLF Skarmory uses Sand Attack on Zakuro's Snorlax, who uses Rest. Turn 364, GLF switches out to Snorlax as Zakuro stays in and uses Sleep Talk, pulling Double Edge. GLF Snorlax is now down to just 36%. Alright, so, Zakuro can now KO GLF Snorlax with a non-critical hit Double Edge. However, Zakuro's Snorlax needs several things to go right for that to happen. First, it needs to win the speed tie, 50% chance. Second, it needs to pull Double Edge from Sleep Talk, 33% chance. Third, it needs to actually land Double Edge. Snorlax has been inflicted with Sand Attack, 75% chance. And finally, Snorlax needs to actually deal enough damage. A Snorlax Double Edge deals 34.2 to 40.3% to an opposing Snorlax. Double Edge has a 71% chance to KO a Snorlax at 36%. Of course, there's a possibility of a crit Double Edge, which would guarantee a KO. A critical hit Earthquake, which is Zakuro's last move, would also KO Snorlax. If you ask me, GLF does not need to risk this. He has a perfectly healthy Skarmory and Umbreon. He could just rest up later with Snorlax when it's safer, after having recovered some HP from leftovers. You do gotta look at this from GLF's perspective though. At this point, we are 365 turns in. This battle has been going on for a while, with grim odds for GLF. I think his overall morale and focus were low at this point, and he just decided to say, screw it. GLF decides to take the risk and stay in with Snorlax. And what ends up happening to him? And with that, GLF Snorlax falls. The first Pokemon has fainted, 365 turns in. This is dreadful for GLF. Things have gone from bad to worse. Snorlax was an important Pokemon for GLF. He could use it to force out some of Zakuru's Pokemon, especially if Zakuru was to keep letting him get spikes up. Defensively, it was another fat Pokemon GLF could use to absorb hits. Most importantly, it was the thing keeping Blissey in check. Now that Snorlax is gone, Blissey is a huge threat to GLF's team. Even Tentacruel is more deadly now. GLF's chances of victory are now even more slim, and his chances of tying the game are worse. In the eyes of Zakuru, as well as some of the spectators discussing the game in the GSC Invitational Discord, it's over. GLF has sunk. It's GG. Enough of the doomer crap though. The drama in the battle chat is about to reach its peak. It's about to explode. On the turn Snorlax fainted, a confident and happy Zakuru says, "Looks like the game is over," in the battle chat. The next turn, he says GLF can forfeit now to save some time. GLF replies with several messages. Huh? No whining now? Now this is all good and fair, huh? LMAO. Zakuru replies with a, "You played like shit and got punished." He again criticizes GLF on the next turn, saying nice protect spam versus Tentacruel. While all that was going on, Zakuru managed to get his Tentacruel safely onto the field, and it managed to remove spikes. Back to the battle chat. You remember earlier when Conflict told Zakuru to be quiet? Yeah, well he announces that he is stepping in the battle chat. On the next turn, he criticizes Zakuru. He claims Zakuru has been outplayed for a lot of this game, and that he really should not talk. Zakuru disputes this, saying he let GLF do his own thing because it wasn't making real progress. He says GLF was wasting his PP for nothing. On the next turn, turn 370, Zakuru claims he played around every crit because he knows this matchup is not losable. If you ask me, that's a bunch of horseradish, and Conflict agrees. Conflict is silent for a few turns, but he comes back on turn 377, calling Zakuru's statement 100% untrue, bringing up the multiple times he risked Tentacruel, a Pokemon that loses him the game if it faints. Also, he could pursue Fortress with Tyranitar for 20%. Zakuru claims he risked losing the mind game and the crits, but that was the only thing he risked, and he only risked it 2 times. Conflict counters this by saying that he never had to risk it at all. If he just sent Tentacruel out versus Fortress and ignored Fortress's HP, he would have never had to risk Tentacruel. Conflict then sharply criticizes Zakuru's quips and trash talk in the chat, calling them embarrassing. Zakuru actually concedes, saying that yeah, I could have done better in that regard. Zakuru also brings up the time he risked Tyranitar to Starmie Surf on turn 42. I think Zakuru was doing all this trash talk as a way to tilt his opponent, to make his opponent mad so that he loses focus. That, or he is just annoyed and taking it out in battle chat. Either way, the quips and trash talk mostly go away after this, aside from on turn 399, when he sarcastically says, "Nice outplays," in the battle chat. So, we have now reached turn 400. We are now more than a third of the way to the endpoint, turn 999. If you ask me, Zokuru can actually win this game pretty soon. Snorlax is gone, Blissey is a huge threat, GLF only has 11 roars and 9 sand attacks left. He is running low on PP for his important moves. I think, by this point, Zokuru has given up on trying to pursue Forretress with Tyranitar. He always sends out Tentacruel to fight Forretress now, not risking having Spike set up. GLF tries to pursue Zokuru's Tentacruel with Umbreon, but it's not working out. GLF's Umbreon is not as useful as Zokuru's is. GLF is not using Growth plus Baton Pass Umbreon. He is instead using the standard Charm, Pursuit, Rest, Sleep Talk set. In the context of this game, Umbreon is a poor man's Pursuit user compared to Zokuru's Tyranitar. It can't get special attack boosts, it can force stuff in with Roar, and it has a lower special attack stat. For all intents and purposes, GLF's Umbreon is just a blob. It's just another tanky Pokemon there to absorb PP. Umbreon's most notable purpose is beating Tyranitar. Even with multiple special attack buffs, Umbreon comfortably stalls out Tyranitar. On turn 410, Blissey actually paralyzes GLF's Raikou with Thunderbolt, the first status infliction Raikou has taken. Blissey can now outspeed and possibly destroy Raikou with Present. We do see how frustrating Present is to use though. Zokuru uses it and misses Present twice, letting Raikou roar it out. This is not the last time we will see Present being an inconsistent trash move. GLF tries to use Rest with Raikou on turn 416, but he's at full HP so it fails. Now it's even harder for Raikou to counter Umbreon. On turn 425, Blissey hits Raikou for 29% with Present. No dice. For now, it's alright though. Zokuru still has 70 in Presents and 50 in Thunderbolts. Turn 428, a growth boosted Blissey hits Skarmory for 69% with Thunderbolt, but it's forced out by Sand Attack. A critical hit Thunderbolt would have KO'd Skarmory. Turn 433, Blissey uses Present versus Raikou and it fails. It says it failed because it was a healing present, and that says it failed if the Pokemon is at full HP. Turn 434, Blissey presents Raikou for 35% and is roared out. Raikou now has just 5 roars left. Turn 449, Umbreon passes Growth to Blissey against Skarmory, who is forced to switch out. He swaps out to Umbreon, and then fearing Present, swaps out to Forretress. Zokuru calls that out though. Because Zokuru stopped trying to pursue Forretress, it actually got back to near full HP off of leftovers. Blissey breaks all that progress by Thunderbolting Forretress on the switch. Forretress is now at 66% HP. The next turn, it suffers another Thunderbolt, which will have KO'd Forretress if it crit, bringing Forretress back to its perennial below 40% HP. GLF sends out Raikou as Blissey shrugs off the toxic Forretress hit it with Heal Bell. A weakened Raikou is now staring down the barrel of death. This giant, pink, smiling blob who is throwing presents at it. Blissey uses Present and again fails to get a high damaging roll, letting Raikou live another day. On turn 458, Raikou uses up its second last roar. It can only roar out Umbreon one more time. Sand Attack Skarmory tries to help its buddy Raikou out, but even that can't last much longer. By turn 474, Skarmory only has 6 Sand Attacks left, although it still hasn't used up a single Sleep Talk. Sleep Talk can cause Sand Attack, as well as Toxic, even if the moves have lost all their PP. Turn 474 is also, finally, the turn where Raikou runs out of Roar PP. Raikou can no longer force out Umbreon or Blissey. Raikou has lost its voice. Raikou can barely do anything now. It only has 3 Thunderbolt PPs left. Raikou has consistently stood up for and defended GLF's team. Let's skip forward a bit. Nothing much relevant happens for the next 30 or so turns. It's now turn 499. A little message pops up in the battle chat, reminding both players that the battle will end in 500 turns. It's something Zakuru hates to be reminded of, while it's a symbol of hope for GLF. Hope that is running out for him. Snorlax is dead, Raikou can no longer roar, Sand Attack and Spike's PP are running out. Foragers can only use Spikes 3 more times. Every time growth is passed to Blissey, it can threaten to end GLF's team if Present feels like cooperating. On turn 503, GLF's Skarmory is staring down a Blissey with 2 growth boosts. Plus 2 Thunderbolts actually has a 10% chance to one-hit KO Skarmory. Thanks to full paralysis, as well as a misused Present, Skarmory survives. On turn 505, Blissey rids its team of status using Heal Bell, something it can only do twice more. Heal Bell only has 8 PP, and Zakuru has burned 6 of them so far. It's crucial that he doesn't burn all of them, as we will come to see. Zakuru keeps attempting to pass growth to Blissey, but Sand Attack's Skarmory is really making that difficult. Zakuru is also running low on growth PP. By turn 516, he has just 10 growths left. On turn 517, GLF Starmie shows up for the first time in a while. If you need an indicator of how irrelevant Starmie has been, it's only used up 5 of its total PP so far. It's only used 5 moves. It hasn't even revealed its last move yet. For comparison, GLF's Raikou has used up 75 of its total PP, 15 times what Starmie has used up. Starmie wastes one of Blissey's presents with Substitute and is then replaced by Raikou. Yet again, Raikou is staring down a Pokemon that can obliterate it. Zakuru chooses not to use Present though, hitting Raikou with 2 weak Thunderbolts. Zakuru changes it up though, and hits Raikou with a Present. That heals it. My oh my, Present is such a crummy move. All it's done so far is get weak damage rolls and heal. I think I overestimated Bliss. Whoa. Okay. Present finally got a good damage roll. Blissey hits Raikou with a Present that deals 90% to the Tiger, forcing it to rest. This is now a golden opportunity for Zakuru. Raikou is asleep. All he needs is some decent damage rolls and Blissey can end the game right here. He uses Present and it misses. He uses it again and it heals. He uses it a third time and Present deals only 31%. Present has proven to be a terribly unreliable and frustrating move for Zakuru this game. It has consistently fallen short despite that 190% roll. Zakuru uses Present a fourth time and again it heals. By this point, Blissey now has just 6 Presents left. This is a move that could have ravaged GLF's team, but Zakuru got consistently terrible luck with it. Zakuru switches Blissey out on turn 531. The next couple dozen turns after 530 aren't very interesting. We see GLF and Zakuru use their Starmie and Snorlax, respectively, for a bit, but not much progress is being made. It seemed like Zakuru was in such a good spot to win, but now it's more up in the air. For now, GLF is managing to survive. He has given up all the notions of actually winning this game. Zakuru has been playing far safer with his Tentacruel, and he stopped giving GLF opportunities. He just doesn't have the PP to win anymore. He can still survive to turn 999 though. By turn 562, he only has one more use of spikes with Forretress. The tension does pick back up though in the 570s, when we see Tentacruel receive a growth boost. We haven't seen much of growth boosted Tentacruel since Snorlax fainted over 200 turns ago, but Zakuru has an idea. Zakuru has a boosted Tentacruel in against Skarmory and mispredicts Toxic, presumably into Starmie or Raikou, 3 times in a row. Zakuru catches what GLF is trying to do and hits Skarmory with a nasty +1 surf on turn 575, dealing 56%. A critical hit Surf would have KO'd Skarmory. This Tentacruel is an issue. Raikou only has one more Thunderbolt PP left, and Starmie fears Toxic. On the plus side, Tentacruel only has 8 PP of Surf left. JLF fights Tentacruel with Umbreon for over 30 turns. Tentacruel actually uses just Surf twice in this Stalemate, mostly burning through its Rapid Spin PP, which it now needs far less that Fortress can only spike up once more. Also during this Stalemate, do we reach turn 600. The 600th would ultimately prove to be the downfall for GLF. Easily the darkest and most costly period for GLF. His team will, spoiler alert, be severely weakened. On turn 607, Zokuru hits Umbreon with a critical hit Surf, forcing it to switch out. GLF begins to panic after this. If you ask me, he misplayed here. He should have just gone out to his Starmie, who is capable of taking Tentacruel on. Instead, GLF risks Fortress to a critical hit Surf and then loses HP on Raikou. GLF has held Tentacruel off though. It now has just 3 Surf PP left. It's not going to be much of a threat from now on. After that, Zokuru uses a Snorlax for a bit of damage dealing. On turn 618, Snorlax hits Fortress for 21% on the switch in, bringing it down to just 16 HP. At this point, Fortress is almost useless. It can only spike up once more, and those spikes will be promptly spun off by Tentacruel. In GLF's eyes, Fortress had done enough. This Fortress has suffered enough. It's been repeatedly bullied by Tentacruel and Tyranitar throughout this match, and it's been unable to accomplish anything. It's been a punching bag. As such, GLF decides to let it go. On turn 619, Fortress sacrifices itself to get spikes up one last time. This sacrifice is 100% going to be in vain, and GLF knows that. 3 turns later, Tentacruel comes in and uses up its very last Rapid Spin PP to remove spikes. Spikes will never go back up. Fortress's legacy is nothing. GLF is now down to just 4 Pokemon. Things are now just depressing for GLF. He has 0 chance of winning this game. His team is battered PP wise, and he is now just holding out for turn 999. Turn 999 is becoming harder and harder to reach though. In the 640s, Tyranitar steps off the bench and again becomes an integral part of Zokuru's team. On turn 646, Zokuru passes growth to Tyranitar for the first time in hundreds of turns, as JLF brings in his Starmie. Starmie is a bit chipped, so boosted Crunch will KO it. If it tries to switch though, it could be KO'd by Pursue. Tyranitar has been hit by Sand Attack, so it only has a 75% chance to land Crunch. Starmie can fish for a miss with Substitute, and burn some Crunch PP in the process. Sounds great. Starmie uses Substitute, and Tyranitar lands Pursue. The next turn, Starmie uses Sub, Tyranitar lands Crunch. Starmie uses Substitute, and Tyranitar again lands Crunch. Starmie can only use Substitute once more. It again uses Substitute, and Tyranitar lands Crunch. It's turn 651. Starmie can Substitute at 14%. If it tries to switch out, it might be KO'd by Pursue. If it stays in and uses either Recover or Surf, Crunch will finish it off. Starmie has to hope and pray that Tyranitar finally misses. Tyranitar is determined to make Zokuru happy though. All those turns spent on the bench it used to hone itself. To hone its accuracy. On turn 651, GLF uses Recover with his Starmie, but it doesn't matter. Tyranitar lands Crunch, gobbling GLF's Starmie up. Half of GLF's team is now gone. With the loss of Starmie, GLF seemingly accepts that he is not going to reach turn 999. In the battle chat, he says, That's fair, I guess. GG. So Kuru replies with a good game. After someone says GG, you might expect a forfeit, but GLF doesn't actually forfeit. I do have to respect GLF for this game. Despite how hopeless this game has been for so long, he has stuck it out. He has refused to forfeit, even with his opponent egging him on to. It's an admirable trait in competitive Pokemon, refusing to give up and continuing to hold out hope that you can somehow win. Only in this case, he can't win, he's only trying to survive. Back to the battle, Umbreon passes growth to Tyranitar, and it becomes obvious what Zokuru is trying to do. Zokuru is trying to drag in Raikou with Roar, so he can wear it down with Pursuit from Tyranitar. He is trying to assassinate Raikou with Tyranitar. After 20 turns of trying to find the right opportunity, he drags in Raikou on turn 673 and pursues it the next turn. On turn 675, Raikou is switched into Tyranitar's Crunch and is forced to use Rest. As it uses Rest, Tyranitar manages to lower its special defense with a subsequent Crunch. Raikou is in serious danger. Keeping it in now is too risky, so he is forced to switch Raikou out. Because of the special defense drop, Raikou takes 51% from Pursue. It's clear now that Raikou isn't gonna survive much longer. Tyranitar is forced to rest because of toxic damage, but it just does not matter. On turn 685, Raikou is dragged out, suffers a weak pursuit the next turn, and finally falls on turn 687. The loyal Tiger who kept GLF's team alive against Blissey and Umbreon has been put to sleep permanently. Now, GLF only has 2 Pokemon remaining. He has Skarmory and Umbreon. When I said the 600s would be rough for GLF, I meant it. He went from having 5 Pokemon to having 2. On turn 694, Zokuru passes 2 growth boosts to Tentacruel, but thanks to MVP Skarmory and his sand attacks, Tentacruel is forced out. Tentacruel does only have 3 Surfs left. In fact, I'll be honest, as we reach turn 700, things don't actually seem that horrible for GLF. He is most certainly between a rock and a hard place, a very hard place at that, but let's look at Zokuru's team. His Umbreon only has 4 growths left, his Tyranitar only has 8 pursuits and 4 crunches left, Tentacruel only has 3 surfs left. GLF may only have 2 Pokemon, but both still have good amount of PP on the recovery moves. Skarmory and Umbreon have 9 and 11 rest PP left, respectively, not to mention leftovers. Maybe it is possible for GLF to still make it to turn 999. Really, the big worry for GLF is still Blissey. Blissey can still threaten to wipe out Umbreon with Present, but as we have seen, Present is just so bad and unreliable. Also, Blissey now has just 5 presents left. Zokuru decides to put all his eggs into one basket. He sets up 3 growth boosts with Umbreon, using up the last of his PP. Zokuru really used up all 61 PP of a move. On turn 722, Zokuru passes growth to a teammate for the final time, passing +3 special attack to Blissey. This following sequence is going to decide the entire game. GLF has to send out Umbreon against Blissey. Skarmory is guaranteed to be one-shot by a +3 Thunderbolts. GLF can no longer run from Present, he just has to accept that. Blissey hits Umbreon with Thunderbolt for 33%. He follows this up with a Present that misses yet again. The good fortune fades next turn though, as Blissey goes back to Thunderbolt, paralyzing Umbreon with it. This is it. Turn 726. Umbreon is paralyzed and at 52%. If Zokuru's Blissey lands a good damage roll with Present, the game is over. 100% over. All Present has to do is cooperate, and Zokuru can finally end this mess of a game. Even if he just gets a decent damage roll, like 30%, he wins if Umbreon gets fully paralyzed. Both players, with bated breath, make their move. Zokuru's Blissey uses Present, and GLF's Umbreon uses Rest. There's no going back now. Oh my golly goodness. Present has yet again failed, and GLF survives another turn. He is not out the woods yet though. Blissey still has 3 more Presents and 5 more Thunderbolts in its quiver. GLF takes a Thunderbolt, but heals it off next turn with Sleep Talk, only for Blissey to whiff another Present. Zokuru again goes with a Thunderbolt into Present combo. On turn 730, Zokuru hits Umbreon, who is at 73% with a Present that again fails to deal devastating damage. Zokuru's Blissey has just one more shot, one more Present to threaten Umbreon. Instead of doing Thunderbolt and then Present, he decides to use 2 Thunderbolts, leaving him with just a single Thunderbolt's PP left. This might not seem too big now, but Zokuru's decision to use 2 Thunderbolts and leave himself with just 1 PP of the move would haunt him and come back to bite him in the ass later on. On turn 733, Zokuru uses up his final Present PP. This is Present's last chance to redeem itself. Its last chance to get a devastating damage roll. Blissey has one more chance. Blissey uses Present. And yet again, Blissey bins it. This is astounding. GLF's team is just determined to reach turn 999. His team has consistently somehow survived this stupid pink Present using blob. And he really has survived. Present has no more PP, and Thunderbolt only has 1 more PP. As mentioned, Zokuru's decision to leave himself with 1 and not 2 Thunderbolts will be important later. With Blissey out of the way, it seems like GLF has done it. He might have just gone and done it. Zokuru's options have mostly disappeared. Umbreon and Blissey are no longer threats. Tentacruel is very low on PP, and both Tyranitar and Snorlax can be stalled out by the Dream Team of Skarmory and Umbreon. This is terrible news for Zokuru. Has he really spent 735 turns trying to break GLF's team, only for it to all be a waste of time? Well, not exactly. Zokuru does still have some options. Zokuru tries to make a bit of progress with Snorlax, who still has a fair amount of attacking PP left. But Snorlax is naturally checked by GLF's 2 Pokemon, so it's not very easy. Zokuru does get an opportunity in the 750s though. On turns 756 and 757, a critical hit double edge would KO Umbreon, but Snorlax fails to land a crit and Umbreon uses Rest. Snorlax did force GLF to use some Rest PP at least. By turn 770, Skarmory has 8 Rests and Umbreon has 7. Still though, he should still have enough PP now to survive until turn 999. Zokuru doesn't have an attacking move with unlimited PP. Or does he? You see, Zokuru has one more trick up his sleeve. On turn 772, a light bulb goes off in Zokuru's head. An idea pops up that could be the key to victory. That idea is Struggle. Struggle is a move your Pokemon is forced to use when it runs out of PP on all of its moves. Struggle is a 50 base power typeless attack that causes recoil damage. Sometimes, Struggle can be a beneficial move to use because it's an attacking move with unlimited PP. Struggle has become Zokuru's path to victory. And who is the Pokemon he will literally and figuratively struggle with? It's none other than Tyranitar. Tyranitar naturally has the highest attack stat of any of Zokuru's Pokemon, so it's the natural choice. Tyranitar struggle deals around 12% to both Skarmory and Umbreon. The struggle path isn't a foolproof strategy. Because Tyranitar has to lose all its PP, that means it has to use up all of its rest PP. That makes Toxic an issue for it. Luckily, Zokuru still has 2 heal bells left on Blissey. Using Struggle, Tyranitar is able to just chip down Skarmory and Umbreon. It can force them to rest every so often. With the Struggle plan in mind, Zokuru immediately begins burning all of his Tyranitar's PP. On turn 788, Tyranitar is set to struggle. Umbreon and Skarmory both have 7 rest PP left. The question remains though, can Zokuru win in time? Can he, using Struggle, manage to run both Skarmory and Umbreon out of rest PP, and then KO them? He has 210 turns left to accomplish this goal. It is going to be close, I can assure you that. Only a few turns into using Struggle, Skarmory uses up its final Toxic, forcing Zokuru to give up turns switching Blissey in and using Heal Bell. Zokuru doesn't spend the next 150 turns solely using Struggle. He does send in Snorlax, Skarmory and Tentacruel from time to time to use Double Edge and Toxic, respectively. For the most part though, this is now Tyranitar vs Struggle, the movie. I think it's time for a montage. At this point, I don't have much more to say, and a lot of what's coming up isn't very interesting. I'm just gonna let the battle play out. Enjoy the montage. It is now turn 950. 950 turns ago did this battle begin. Since the montage began, Zokuru's Tyranitar has made waves. By turn 950, GLF Skarmory only has 2 more PP on rest, while Umbreon only has 1. Zokuru only has 49 more turns to win. This is getting down to the wire. Tyranitar just keeps using Struggle. It keeps forcing damage. Enough damage to force GLF to use Rest every so often. There's little thought to it, and little difference in the outcome. Sometimes, Struggle lands a critical hit. Sometimes, it's weakened by Charm. Zokuru is rapidly running out of time. At this stage in the game, every mistake he makes can cause him to fail. He has to really think his turns through and make sure he uses every turn well. It's not just the Tyranitar show too. Tentacruel still has 2 Surfs and 4 Toxics left. Blissey still has that last Thunderbolt PP to hit Skarmory. On turn 960, Zokuru sends in Skarmory to Toxic Umbreon. He crucially misses a Toxic on turn 960, forcing him to Toxic again on turn 961. He cannot afford to lose any turns. Umbreon is forced to use up its final rest. Zokuru then lands 2 consecutive critical hit struggles on turn 965 and 966. A Charm attack drop forces Tyranitar out the next turn, causing Zokuru to bring in his Tentacruel. Tentacruel burns its final 2 Surfs, hitting Umbreon for 19% and Skarmory for 37%. Zokuru gets right back to using Struggle, trying so desperately to break GLF's Dream Team. Unfortunately, with one of its final Sleep Talks, Skarmory inflicts Tyranitar with Toxic, forcing Zokuru to waste turns healing it off with Blissey. Zokuru then brings in his Skarmory on turn 978. He uses Curse on turn 979. We are now down to 20 turns. The next turn, he manages to land a Toxic on Umbreon, sealing its fate. Umbreon has no more PP on rest. It is now going to perish to Toxic. Tyranitar returns to the field on turn 981. GLF Skarmory has lost all of the PP on all of its moves, besides Rest. It still has a single Rest left. Skarmory is forced to switch out if it doesn't want to use up that last Rest, which it does not want to do yet. GLF is thus forced into switching out to Umbreon, who cannot survive Struggle plus Poison damage for much longer. It's on its last legs. GLF tries so desperately to preserve that last Rest on Skarmory, with Umbreon suffering for it. At last, on turn 988, Umbreon finally falls, 978 turns after it first hit the field. Zokuru now has just one more Pokémon to defeat, one more obstacle in his path. GLF now has just one soldier left to defend him until turn 999. The final boss is the Skarmory that has defended GLF's team so effectively with Sand Attack. On turn 989, GLF is forced into using up that final rest. Now, when Skarmory wakes up, it is forced into using up its own Struggle. Tyranitar has 9 turns left to defeat Skarmory with Struggle. But it's not alone. Blissey still has one more Thunderbolt left to fire off. Turn 990, Skarmory is left with 89%. The next turn, it's left with 83%. It is now the time in Zokuru's mind to unleash that Thunderbolt. On turn 992, Blissey is sent out as Skarmory is forced into using Struggle. Now it's taking a bit of recoil damage. If Blissey lands a critical hit Thunderbolt, Skarmory is done for. On turn 993, Skarmory uses Struggle, dealing 4% to itself. It is time for the Thunderbolts. Blissey uses Thunderbolts and doesn't get a critical hit. You really gotta ask if this was the right time to use Thunderbolts. It might have been better to do it later on. There's nothing Zokuru can do though. He just has to bring Tyranitar back and use Struggle. He just has to struggle and pray. We now have just 5 turns left. I can count the amount of turns left on one hand. Turn 995. Tyranitar and Skarmory both use Struggle, leaving Skarmory with 36%. A critical hit Struggle from either Pokemon will cause Skarmory to faint. Both Pokemon fail to crit Struggle on turn 996. Skarmory is at 28%. Both Pokemon trade Struggle on turn 997. Skarmory is left at 22%. Both Pokemon fail again to land a critical hit Struggle on turn 998. Skarmory is left at just 15% HP. Finally, the ultimate turn. We have arrived at turn 999. Skarmory is at 15% and all both players can do is use Struggle. There is no other option. If either Pokemon crit their Struggle, Skarmory will take enough damage to be KO'd. If neither Pokemon crit, Skarmory will survive at 2 or maybe even 1% before being healed back up by leftovers. This is the ultimate turn. Both players have slogged through this game for over 2.5 hours, and it all comes down to this one single turn. One turn out of 999. There is nothing either player can do but pray. Zokuru orders his Tyranitar to use Struggle, while GLF forces his Skarmory to also use Struggle. And that was Zokuru versus GLFG number 7. A battle won by nobody. Not Zokuru, not GLF, and not the spectators. Zokuru was one turn away from winning this game. If he had one more turn to play, he would have defeated that Skarmory. The amount of one turn changes that could have resulted in a Zokuru victory are enormous. But there's not really a point to saying, what if, now is there? The game is over. Zokuru or GLF can never go back and change what happens. Every time this game is watched, the result is the same. That is how it will be for the rest of eternity. I was there to watch the ending of this game. I knew, then and there, that this game was something special. This was a once-in-a-career kind of game. From all the drama in the battle chat, to the wacky team choices, the wacky GSC mechanics, and the simply bonkers ending, it's just too good. GLF managed to survive Zokuru's nightmare team by the skin of his teeth. I think this game, better than any other game I have seen, showcases how sometimes the longest games can be the most interesting and the most memorable.